We're going to be looking at two different standards this week. Standard 3 that focuses on character, and then Standard 6 that focuses on point of view. So going first to Standard 3, the anchor standard says, analyze how and why individuals, events, and ideas develop and interact over the course of a text. This is a standard that appears basically at every grade level, at least in the elementary school. We start in kindergarten, just identifying the characters, the settings, and the major events, and then we describe them. And notice by second grade, we're looking at how the characters respond to some of those major events and challenges. Moving on to third grade, the characters are contributing to what happens in the story. Second grade, they're responding to the events, but now the characters' actions are kind of the stimulus for other events to happen. By fourth grade, we're looking in depth at character setting and event and going back to the story and picking out some specific details. This is where we would start talking about you get to know a character through their thoughts, words, and actions. And at fifth grade, we're doing the same things, only this time we're comparing two or more character settings or events. So you can see how those skills progress and get more and more difficult or advanced. So how do we teach this? Lots of different things, but we can start with the younger students with creating character webs or maps or diagrams. There are all kinds of graphic organizers out there that deal with character. What we want to do is help them understand the character's motivations, the relationships between two or more characters, and what the character's role is in the overall story. So if we make a web, we would put the character's name in the middle, and then we would have spokes going out from it. And on those spokes, we would put different character attributes. Perhaps the character might be greedy. The character might be devious. You know, what are the attributes? And with the older students, we would then ask them to provide some evidence from the text that would support their saying that that's an attribute of the character. We can make Venn diagrams where we compare two characters, or instead of just comparing the characters, we might pick an event in the story and compare how one character reacts to that event with how another character reacted to it. An interesting idea might be to make a character trading card. As the students are reading and picking their characters, they need to really pay attention to some of those critical details, the important quotes, what are the big events, what are their important interactions, all of those kinds of things. You might have them even go back and do a second read of the text and make notes on sticky notes. Then on side one of this trading card, they would come up with a visual portrait of the character, and this would provide evidence that they understood what the physical features of the character were. On the other side, they would give vital statistics. This would be information more about the character traits rather than the physical traits, and just whatever they have gathered about this character, and they need to make that in a format that's easily read by others. Then they can share their character trading cards with each other. We might have them do timelines. Take a particular character and do a timeline of that character's life. For older students, in addition to the timeline, then they would provide evidence from the story about each event that they put on the timeline. I'm a scrapbooker, and so this idea really appeals to me. Have them make a character scrapbook. In the scrapbook, there would be a combination of writing and illustrations, and the scrapbook would highlight things such as their personality traits, you know, how they responded to different events, how they interact with other characters. You might even have them research the contemporary context of the story and then have some pages that include that information. We can do letter and diary writing where the students assume the personality of one of the characters and write a letter maybe to another character, or be interesting for a character to write a letter to the author and ask some questions about why the author did things that he did. And then we can do like a 3-column chart where we're analyzing a character's responses to the events. So in column 1, you would summarize the events of the story. In column 2, you would describe how the character responded to the event. And then in column 3, you would analyze how that event affected the character's growth and what changes took place as a result of it. We might have a conversation with a character. It could be one character and an interviewer. It could be 2 characters, either from the same book or from different books. To do this, I would have students work with a partner and come up with interview questions, and then they would present their interview to the whole class. Some questions that you might think about: what are the most important things you accomplished in the story? It would be really interesting to hear what an individual character thought about as an answer to that question. Why do you think they are important? What events or circumstances do you wish were different in the story? Why did you choose these events? Or what was an obstacle you encountered in the story and how did you overcome that obstacle? What's your dream for the future if your story continued? Boy, that would get kids to really get inside these characters' heads and to think much more deeply about them. Our second standard is Standard 6, Reading Standard 6. The Anchor Standard says, assess how point of view or purpose shapes the content and style of a text. So now we're going to look at point of view. This starts in 1st grade, where we just basically have the students identify who's telling the story. In 2nd grade, we look at differences in points of view and how when you're reading it out loud, you might change your voice to show one character versus another. By 3rd grade, they're being able to understand that how they think about something might be different from how a character or a narrator in a story thinks about it. 4th grade, we're comparing and contrasting those points of view in which different stories are narrated. This is where we introduce the idea of 1st and 3rd person narrations. And then in 5th grade, we've already identified what point of view is being used. How does this affect or influence what happens in the story? That's an important decision an author always has to make about who's going to tell the story. And they make that decision based on what their goals are. So how do we teach this? Okay, first of all, I think we have to start with young children, exposing them to lots and lots of books told from lots and lots of different points of view. Once they're familiar with a lot of books, we might take some time and sort the books. We might put all the books that are told in the 1st person in one pile and the books that are told by the 3rd person in another pile. As they get older, they would then maybe need to provide some evidence that that is indeed the point of view. We might make a chart for the classroom, and every time we read a book, talk about what was the point of view in this book and record it. It would be interesting, let's say you went on a field trip or you had some special event, have each student sit and write the story from their own perspective. Then compare their stories with each other, and they'll begin to see that even though they were at the same event, they have different perspectives on what happened, and call their attention to that, have a discussion about it. We could make character perspective charts. Would be a 2-column chart, and we'd put the characters' names at the top, and then along the left-hand side we could list some topics such as setting, problem, goals, attempts to resolve the problem, and so forth. And then we would look at each character in terms of those things. It'd be interesting, let's say there's one character who lives in the city and one who lives in the country. So the setting for the one character is going to be the city, for the other character is going to be the country. And then you can begin to delve into that. Does the fact that they live where they live affect what else happens in the story? We can have them do some dramatizations. Books that are written in the first person perspective work well for this. So what we might do is have the students focus on a character and consider questions such as, what would you look like if you were this character? How would this character move and sound? How would this character act in response to other characters he or she might encounter? And then the students can get up and kind of act out some events, keeping in mind the perspectives. You could do character monologues. A student would pick a character, dress up like that character, draw a poster about that character, and then maybe write a monologue from that character's perspective, where they would introduce the character and then talk about some major point in the book. And then those, after they have a chance to practice, could be presented to the class. Finally, you could have them write 2 or 3 voice poems. There is Joyful Noise is a book of poetry by Fleischman, and in that book, the poems, like maybe there are 2 different characters, and one of them tells part of the story, the other one jumps in with his part of the story. Sometimes they talk together when they agree. So we could do this one of 2 ways. Each student could just write a poem from a different character's perspective, or we could get several students together who have picked different characters and see if they can mesh their poems into one and possibly perform those in front of the class. We might also have 2 characters from the same book or from different books that have the same theme or plot have some kind of a dialogue in front of the class. So those are just some ideas about getting students used to that whole idea of point of view and understanding that who's telling the story really affects what story you hear.